Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Light Council series, the show where we're having elevated conversations to help awaken the inner light within and help elevate the world. I am so excited to have my guest here, Chris. But before we get into that, I would love to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Elizabeth Planson, and I am a soul purpose, soul gift activator, healer, spiritual mentor, and the creator of the Purpose and Abundance Activator Method, which helps dissolve your blocks, your limitations, and calibrates you to an entirely new frequency so your next level of purpose and abundance can come through that you are meant for. So I would love to offer you all a free consultation for those who are interested in working with me. And as a gift to you, I will be giving you a catalog of all of my past guests, free gifts. And I know Chris has a free gift as well that will be going in there, but you will get that gift today as well from Chris of her free gift, which she'll share about later on and at the end of the show. So make sure you stay to the end to hear about her gift because it's really important. So yeah, without further ado, I would love to introduce Chris, bring her on, and allow you to please tell us who you are, how do you serve others, and how do you love to help the world?
Well, thank you. I love to help people heal from childhood trauma as well as narcissistic abuse. I am
Mm.
a spiritual counselor, energy healer, and psychic medium.
Mm.
And I came into my own gifts because I made a very important step in my life to cut off my narcissistic parents.
Mm.
And what I didn't recognize at the time was that all of my trauma growing up was muting all of my abilities. So once I
Mm-hmm.
started to heal, I was able to essentially come online. And now I help others heal in a similar way. I read chakras. So I
Mm-hmm.
help read the energy body to see what story the body is sharing. And I love as I've seen people heal, their abilities come online too. So it's a beautiful progress that I am just honored to be part of.
That's so beautiful. And I really think, this work is so important. And so I kind of want to just start off right off the bat by asking, like, What what actually does narcissism mean? Because I feel like this term gets thrown around a lot like nowadays, right? And so like I don't really always think everyone actually understands what it is and like it's almost and correct me if I'm wrong, like get used a lot, right? So like, really what is it and how do you recognize if you are, being subjected to narcissistic behavior or even a narcissist yourself.
Yes, thank you for saying that because I completely agree with you that it's almost becoming trendy to
Yeah.
label someone as a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a narcissistic society, but it's really important to look at the fact we all have the ability to be narcissistic. It doesn't mean we are a quote unquote narcissist.
Mm.
Narcissism in itself is a spectrum, which essentially ranges from a covert narcissist to an overt narcissist, even higher to like a sociopath. But when it comes to narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, it is considered very difficult to diagnose because most of the people that actually have that personality disorder are not going to psychiatrists and psychologists for help. So
Mm-hmm.
even psychiatrists and psychologists will say that it is very difficult to diagnose because the people they are usually seeing are the ones that have been subjective to those behaviors and are
Mm-hmm.
trying to heal from it. But recognizing first it's a spectrum, but also that we all have these tendencies. A true narcissist does not have the ability to be self reflective. Somebody
Mm.
that can at least take that moment to say, am I narcissistic? Is there something I can do to be better? That's someone who's self reflective. So they may have some tendencies, like I said, we all do, but a true narcissist will not be able to do that. It's just not in them.
Got it. Got it. And so I think that's so powerful to know because, yeah, it could be easy to just say, oh, this person's a narcissist because they're doing XYZ to me. But like being able to differentiate the two and not label someone just right off the bat, right? Also yourself too. Like I know I've even questioned myself, like, am I Because I maybe even didn't really even know, right? Especially when it comes to like in your marriage, right? Like, are you being narcissist? But I love that you say like it almost like feels lighter to give yourself some grace that like it's almost like in us all and it's okay. Like you don't have to be hard on yourself if you recognize this, right? It's the act of actually reflecting on it and how can I be better next time? That doesn't make it like this is your label, right?
Exactly. When we know better, we do better. And the ability to be self-reflective is not only important for ourselves, but it's important for our relationships, the people around us. If we have children, it's to always be self-reflecting is always putting yourself in this position to be better as a human being. So I think that's
Yeah.
very essential, especially at this time, because so many of us are awakening. So self-reflection is helping many of us shed a lot of these older layers of energy that are no longer serving us. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to really reprogram ourselves and reprogram our behaviors and recognizing our patterns that aren't serving us and, to shift forward into just a better version of ourselves.
So, talking again about like behaviors and patterns of, how do you like know when someone is actually, besides like not being reflective on their behavior, like are there certain behaviors that would be considered narcissistic?
Yes, incredibly. So a covert narcissist is somebody who is probably a little more quiet, manipulative.
Hmm.
My mother is a covert narcissist, so one of her primary things to have done was to give the silent treatment
Mm,
and manipulate through that to essentially ignore me until I did what she wanted. And
mm,
if ever I called her out on her behavior, she would ignore me even further. So I would often be apologizing to her for having said she upset me.
hmm.
And so that's again, that's manipulation. I didn't recognize that at the time, but that's what a covert narcissist generally does. An overt narcissist is probably your more textbook narcissist that we're used to hearing about. They're more grandiose in nature. They tend to be loud, kind of in your face. Their ego is stepping into the room well before they are. You just kind of feel that there's an obnoxious tendency to them. The overt narcissist is one that if there's ever tendencies of violence that I'm always very wary of because, as we first talked about, narcissism is kind of thrown out very flippantly, but also as setting boundaries. Because with an
Hmm.
overt narcissist, you have to very much be careful with the kind of boundaries you set because if they are violent and volatile, a boundary can act as a threat and they will respond in kind. So I feel like really having this kind of knowledge and awareness is very important. Uh, Not every overt narcissist is volatile
Hmm.
and violent. I was raised by one, though. My father is that way. And you really had to be aware. And, I became hyper vigilant. And so those are the behaviors that were kind of more scary. And they wouldn't blindside you like an overt narcissist, or excuse me, a
Yeah.
covert narcissist would. So it's really understanding again that it's a spectrum and we could all fall on different levels of it. Even a overt narcissist might have some covert tactics that they use and vice versa. A lot of us in this type of work will joke that they all seem to share the same playbook because they say a lot of the same things and exhibit a lot of the same behaviors. But
Hmm.
really, everything that it's coming from is a loss of self somewhere along the line. And they are acting from that position,
Hmm.
that place of where they're kind of frozen in time and didn't develop past a certain point. So a lot of them are kind of behaving like children or teenagers. That's why so many of their behaviors are very immature because they never got to mature beyond that from an energetic standpoint. Their bodies did, but their minds not as much.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really important too, is also to recognize where this rooted from, right? And my other question to that is then like can that relationship be repaired? Like, is it possible to, or like, how would you bring it up to someone that you suspect, if you're in a relationship or in a marriage or whatever that is a narcissism, like, can that be let go of, transformed? Like, obviously, couple counseling is I think really important piece of that, right? But like, is it possible to change from that?
I think it's going to depend on the person. If someone is truly a diagnosable NPD, I will say no.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, it goes back to the inability to be self-reflective. Because being able to try and work through something, it takes doing that. It takes looking at yourself in the mirror and looking at how you can do better and be better. So, whereas someone, if they have narcissistic tendencies, 100% they have the ability to heal, and they have the ability to heal in a relationship. When we talk about energy and like attracts like, you know, I've been married for quite a long time now, and we both have narcissistic parents. We both brought narcissism into this relationship and have been
Mm-hmm.
able to work through and heal a lot of that together. Obviously, we didn't know it at the time, but just being able to be self-reflective and not blame the other person for everything you think might be going wrong in your life is very important. So, like, as I said, it really comes down to the type of person.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And that's a really good, important part, right? Like is just knowing when it's fixable or not fixable. And obviously, maybe consulting with a licensed professional that is, really, and someone like yourself that's really knows this really deep down and can help you through it. And so talking a little bit about, childhood trauma, and that's a whole different bag of worms, right? But also can cause things like this as well, and reflective and all of that. What is the biggest way to, recognize that you've had childhood trauma in if you're struggling in life and it actually stems from childhood?
Well, aside from what I do in reading the energy body, I always look at if someone is falling into a trauma response. So fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we fall into that, our nervous system is essentially pre-wired to respond from that. So, like, for myself, I was in this hypervigilance. I was in fight or flight for pretty much most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did that affect my nervous system, it affected just who I was as a human being, how I showed up. It also affected my health. I had a thyroid condition. I have since healed through healing everything else, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that came from a disrupted, dysregulated nervous system, and that came from my childhood. I always had to be on alert. I was scared for a good amount of my childhood. Was I going to get hit? Was I going to get yelled at? There was a lot of volatility. So, looking at the trauma responses are the most common. Most people will fall into two, not just one. And it could vary, but for the most part, you tend to have the top two that you'll fall into regularly. And that comes up when you're feeling in any way threatened. And that's just, it could happen in anything. It's not just because like in my case, I feel like I might get hit. If someone, cut me off in traffic, a trauma response gets ignited. If somebody said something that I felt was rude, a trauma response can get ignited. So it's looking at how you respond to the things that upset you. That shows you what your trauma response is, and then working from that. So there's like an element of reverse engineering. You know what your trauma response is. Now, what's the build up to it? And then how you work through that. It will depend on the person and the trauma response. But there are absolute ways, but it absolutely 100% comes down to calming and regulating the nervous system.
Yeah. So when you say trauma responses, that's kind of the same thing as being triggered, like
Exactly.
noticing your triggers. And like for me, it's always like your triggers is even it could be a symbol of just being annoyed, right? Or judgment, right? Coming from judgment. Like how are you like you're judging someone else? Like that's actually a reflection of something that needs to be healed within you, right? Or like you said in the car, you're triggered and then like you have like you get angry or whatever it is, right? It's something within you that has to be healed. And so, what is like the first step someone can take when they realize they've identified a trigger in themselves?
Well, if it's active, like you're in the moment, the first thing is to breathe because
Mm-hmm.
whenever we're triggered, we actually don't breathe normally and naturally. We're taking short, heightened breaths, but
Mm-hmm.
to take a deeper breath, it really helps. Like you might even realize that. when you breathe, you're not filling up your lungs entirely.
Right.
So that's an important first step. That's like in the moment. Now, if it's one of those things you've been triggered and you cannot stop thinking about it, you got to
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself to feel something in that. So when we can't stop thinking about it, it's because something still is bothering us about it. So haunting in a way. And we energetically, there's usually something stifled. So usually like I'll see it in one of the chakras where that energy becomes stuck. And when we find that stuck energy, it's helping to release that. So you might have to cry, you might have to scream, you might have to just go for a walk, but it's helping that energy move and get out because when it's stagnant is when it weighs on us and we can't stop thinking about it.
Mm, yeah, I love that. And so, like, kind of like thinking about it for the moment and just letting yourself, your body release in
Mhm.
whatever way it wants to release, right? However that may be. And yeah, like, it's funny, like, how actually screaming can be very difficult for you, like, as a person. Like, I know it was for me in before, and it has been. And when, if you're frustrated or angry, and one of my mentors was like, just scream. And I was like, it was so difficult for me to actually just let myself just scream and yell, right? Like I was like, it was almost like again being silenced. Like,
Yeah.
and someone else pointed this out to me, because she's like, just go scream in a pillow or, and let it out. So you're not, the whole house doesn't hear you or whatever. But this other person pointed out, she's like, isn't that interesting how we always say scream in a pillow, but actually what you're doing is still silencing yourself, right? You're still muffling your full expression. So it's like, even if you have to go in your car, right, by yourself, let yourself scream fully. Like, let's not silence you even more.
Yeah, that's such a great point because anyone who struggles to scream, that in itself can be a trauma response because you probably weren't allowed to show and express emotion growing up. So
Mm-hmm.
now that you have the ability to, your body doesn't know how. And we have
Mm-hmm.
to teach that it's safe to feel, it's safe to express, because screaming is often connected to a form of anger. And we stifle anger in this society so much. That's
Yeah.
why people are so angry because it's been
Mm-hmm.
stifled so much. And you have a lot of very cranky people walking around because they haven't really been able to process it. So when we allow it at those, early budding stages, feel the
Yeah.
anger. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry. When we start doing things like lashing out, that's when the anger has grown and now you're developing into something more rage centered. And
Mm-hmm.
that's again what happens when we stifle energy. Energy doesn't stay stifled. It moves, it shifts, it grows legs, and then it can overcome us. And when we become overcome by our own energy body, is when we start saying things like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what came over me. I just felt so angry. It's been stifled for years. So we have to teach ourselves how to release that.
So really, yeah. So when you're in the moment, breathe and allow yourself to feel, or like take some time later that day or whenever, and allow yourself to feel the situation, the feeling that came up for you, and process it fully. Because I mean, you and I both know this. Like, if we don't process these emotions, they just end up going and being stored in our body, in our energetic body, and then eventually they manifest in ways that we don't want, such as disease, right?
Yep.
Or just an explosion of emotions later on down the road because it's like a pressure cooker. So it's really important to actually allow yourself to feel the emotion so you can process it and release it, almost like releasing it with love, like, and letting it go.
Exactly. That's why I had my thyroid condition. I was silenced for most of my life or criticized for ever speaking out. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I started developing symptoms of an autoimmune thyroid condition. And
Mm-hmm.
when I started to heal a lot of the stuff, heal a lot of the emotions, allow myself to feel. I mean, it wasn't magical, but in a way it felt magical. A condition I was told I would have for life, I essentially was able to heal because I allowed my body to feel.
Mm. So how did you know that it was healed? Like, did you just stop taking your medicine and then get a blood test and realize that your numbers were still the same?
Well, for me, I never accepted medication to begin with.
Hmm.
I'm a little stubborn when it comes to that, and I've had some really negative experiences in the medical field, and in pretty serious ways. So when I was told I needed to be on a medication, I said no. So I feel when and any healing journey, our choice matters a lot. So me just making that choice, no, that's not for me. I will figure this out another way. I had no
Hmm.
idea what, but I had full faith in myself to figure it out. So for a while, I was able to have like supplements to help support my thyroid. I changed my diet, and there was, and a lot of it was behavioral, just not having to hold in feelings,
Hmm.
that stifled energy in the throat
Yeah.
chakra. The throat chakra is so incredibly powerful, but it's also sensitive. The thyroid gland is sensitive, and then being connected to the endocrine system is very sensitive. It's tied to your emotions, it's tied to your adrenals. So that's all energy in
Hmm.
the body. And when we learn how that works, then we learn how to support our bodies better. So eventually, knowing I was healed was not feeling the need for any supplements anymore. I wasn't symptomatic anymore. I used to feel like there was like a lump in my throat that went away.
Mm.
I am a mother of four, so the tiredness I would say is always inconsistent.
Right.
But I at least know better in terms of taking care of my body and not getting myself to that point of depletion where I just can't even drag myself out of bed.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's just, it's something that is always on my mind when because I talk about healing so much and all these things. So like just knowing when it's actually worked, right? Rather than just and obviously we tap into the way we feel. So I would love for you to, first talk about your free gift that you have for everyone, and then also how can people work with you? What kind of offers do you have, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so my main service is energy healing slash reading, where I essentially read someone's seven chakras and
Hmm.
I will tell the story that the body is telling me. So not everyone can connect with me in that way. So I have offered a PDF to help people assess their own chakras and kind of
Hmm.
start to get to know them, because when you really understand your chakras, you can start to understand your body more and more, because it's essentially the energy telling you what's going on. So you're learning more about your own symptoms and learning about how your body is responding, I think is just very valuable information. So that's my free gift. And the easiest way
Awesome.
for people to connect with me is just through my website, which is my name, chriswasko.com.
Amazing. And I will definitely share those links in the description below for everyone. So I have so enjoyed this conversation. I think it's really important. It was informative, right? Just to even have that definition of what narcissism is and like how to different ways to recognize it. And even overcome it in yourself. And so, if you had any, like one last piece of wisdom or advice that you would love to share with the collective, I would love for you to share that.
I always love to let people know that it takes time to heal, because it takes the body time to adjust to the energy. I say this from being the type of person that would rather heal yesterday than wait like weeks to months. But our body gets very accustomed to where we're at. So in order to retrain it, we have to give it that time and that grace to allow it to shift and not fight it. So just give your body that time to allow your energy to shift. And, instead of trying something and saying, oh, that didn't work, give
Hmm.
yourself that period of grace. But you usually, if you don't see any shift within 3 months, then there's probably something else going on. So that's just kind of a informational thing for people to have.
No, I appreciate you saying that because I think it's so common sometimes for people to be like, "Oh, well, that didn't work. I didn't feel anything, nothing happened or whatever,"
Yeah.
right? But understanding that like you have to be open and accepting and believe in the ability and the power of whatever you're receiving for it to work. Like I remember my acupuncturist even said this like about my husband wasn't really sure about it if it actually worked or like if it did anything. And she's like, well, there's no point for him to get it then because then it's not going to work. And it really comes down to like whatever you believe to be true will be true. but
Exactly.
also our energy sometimes takes a little bit time to calibrate, and things need to unfold and process, because if we were given all of the healing at one time, just as if we were given all of the manifestations or all of the gifts or all of the things, right? Like our body wouldn't know what to do. It would like
Yeah.
almost implode, right? Like implode, like what's the word? Like not explode, but like
Yeah,
come in
implode.
a,
Yeah, it would
yeah,
reject it ultimately. It's a rubber
yeah,
band effect. If we pull too hard too fast, you could snap the rubber band and just go right back to where you were. But if you
right.
gradually are stretching and allowing for that slack, the energy adjusts.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that point about give it some time and some just like be patient. It sucks sometimes to be patient, but
Mm.
sometimes we need that, right?
A
Especially when it
lesson in
comes.
itself.
I mean, that is my life lesson. I know this to
Likewise.
be true.
Yeah.
Like it is totally my life lesson of patience, and it's what I'm still very much learning, but have gotten a lot better than I when I first started this journey. That's for sure. So.
Likewise. Yeah.
Yes, thank you again for being here today and being our guest. I so appreciate you. And thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time on the Light Council series.